As Roland Barthes says in Cambra Lucida, the photograph does not necessarily say what is no longer, but only for certain what has been. In my work, I am seeking through images to try and reach back to a specific point in time in the British landscape and then reach forward to future generations to show what is there now. My current work seeks to examine land management, post-war development, nature and neglect. In a series of common but disparate locations, I am seeking through images to explore what has become of many hundreds of former POW sites, some hidden and some known, in our towns, cities and countryside. In Britain, we've got a landscape that's been built and marked by the hand of man, and we have traces within that landscape of what came before. Where man has not been able to destroy those traces, given time, nature will seek to do so. The buildings will slowly decay. They will be overcome by weeds, brambles and trees and slowly fade. Along will come a person with an economic need to build, or the politician with yet a need to build another new road or a bridge to nowhere, and that landscape will yet again change. In the 1940s, it was politics that shaped our landscape, with the building of military encampments. Some were built from what was already there, and yet others were built on what was then greenfield sites. Many of these constructions were temporary in nature and were built using prefabricated huts of wood, concrete, and that ubiquitous of all military buildings, the Nissen hut. The first part of my project is fundamental, and that is research. Where are these sites now and what do they look like? Now, I started with a list of various addresses, names, but these are symbolic, they're references, they're not absolutes. To find an absolute, you need something like a lat-long address, and this has taken a lot of research. One of the primary research tools I've gone and used to do this has been the mapping tools provided by Google Ordnance Survey et al. In doing this, I've used these tools in a satellite view to actually look down on the landscape, and I'm looking for patterns and symbols, layouts, and things that I recognise through symbolic analysis. In seeking to place my work, I've been directed to look at the work of other practitioners of landscape art within the UK, people such as John Kippin and Paul Hill. Now, I don't think there's much of a comparison between the sort of work I'm doing and the work that John Kippin did. Particular work that I've been referred to is Cold War Pastoral of Greenham Common. In that, he's shooting a single site just after it's closed. My work is infinitely more diverse in that I'm covering multiple sites 70 odd years later. However, the work of Paul Hill is far more relevant. With work of Paul, he's shooting primarily landscape work in and around the Peak District, specifically looking at scars left in the landscape by former lead mining. Now, I happen to know Paul and his work very well because he is friends with a former tutor of mine, Nick Locke. But again, there are comparisons between his work, his technique, his feeling, and the fact that, like Paul, I too started with black and white film processing, and I eschew tools such as Photoshop. It is when I start to look at the work by Mark Wilson in Last Stand that I really start to see comparisons and relationships to my own work. In this particular body of work, Mark has researched various sites and things across the UK and overseas. Defensive fortifications that were built, have seen their life end, and have just been left to nature to slowly erode. Some of these sites have been lost, some have been retained, some have been redeveloped. He's showing us within his work his actual feeling for this sort of environment, this feeling of abandonment of what was there, the former strength and purpose of these particular sites. Now, in particular, I start to look at one of the shots here of what's called the high angle battery at the Isle of Portland. Now, trick here, the actual image is one of mine. But again, I've put this up to actually show what's going on. I shot this particular image just before I started this course, but again, it is showing the connections between myself, with Mark, the love of landscape, and looking at these sort of environment. Returning to my project, these images were shot at a former POW site in Oxfordshire. This particular site has retained the original POW camp boundaries and is divided between a caravan site, a scrapyard and a roadside cafe. There are a lot of elements here that draw the eye. There are Nissen huts, there are prefab buildings. The cafe is a converted hut that is now in brick, but it's still on the original foundations. In the centre of the camp there is a fountain. This was built by Italian POWs. I can go around this site, I can run the whole project from this site. It is rich in imagery, it calls back to its past. There's a lot of colour, there's a lot of shape, there's a lot of texture. This particular site is right at the end of the Greenham Common runway and very close to where John Kipping took his Cold War pastoral shots. Again, it's coming back to the theme of the old Nissen hut and abandoned sites, and here we've got a children's doll's house. This is coming back to the urban explorer, the abandoned buildings, and it's what people sometimes criticise as ruin porn. People like John Patrick in his series on Detroit and the ruins there, and the criticism of this type of work. And it's a criticism I reject, because this sort of work, it just has an appeal to me. However, there is a problem in this and in my project. My project is a large, diverse project. Thus far, I've mapped over 460 sites. I'm not going to get to visit them all, and it's very tempting to stay with the sites that contain the Nissen huts and the obvious connections to the military and to the past. But most sites have been redeveloped. There are houses, there are factories, there are schools, there are golf courses. I've got all of these things in my project, and I'm going to be shooting them all. The closest I've come to contextualising my project as a whole is when I start looking at projects based in and around London, where people are looking at the various bomb sites sort of then and now. Work such as that by Beth and Thomas Atkinson in their photos of the London bomb sites. But again, it's not a complete match. Their project is London-centric only and very small sites. I'm looking at all over the country and very large sites. I don't look at this as a failing. If you can't contextualise the whole project, that is a strength, and it means the project is unique. So, where do I go from here? I don't know.